Everyone, my name is Jamal. So I had to learn that.
Jamal who?
Jamal Quazi is my name. And these guys gave me a great introduction because my topic is about database dating. I wanted to do a talk that was a little bit more personal, a little bit less focused on those external metrics and more about kind of the self, and also kind of mainstream to get people's attention. So I picked dating because I think a lot of people do that. It started here. Right. So about me, just some pertinent facts that I think relate to the talk. Born and raised in New York City, that will come up later in the talk. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to say entrepreneur in a French accent. If dating stuff kind of interests you, let's talk after this because I'm working on a project. Not really about this stuff, but kind of in the dating realm. I avidly pursue, I'm going to read this, avidly pursue intellectual activities, technical and scientific endeavors, and esoteric knowledge. According to Wikipedia, that makes me a nerd. My last relationship was 2 years ago with a wonderful, amazing woman. It lasted for about 3 years, and I broke it off. And she asked me why, and I didn't have a good answer. I did not know. I really didn't know. So it sparked this kind of a 2-year-long journey, probably, I guess really about a year-long journey, to really answer her question. You know, ultimately, I mean, it just wasn't working, and that's all I could say. I was like, I don't know. And it took me a long time. So since then, I've had about 30 to 50 dates, probably even more than that. That seems like a lot, but it's really only like 2 dates a month. If you think about it. I don't know. So yeah. So fundamental question of this talk is, how do I know somebody is right for me? Right for me. And even that, I would kind of challenge that notion of right. This is a typical answer, you just do, you just know, right? But, okay, how many of you know something and then later on you actually just think you know something? Right? 1 person, 2 people, okay. Liars. I would argue that that first part, the I know part, is the beginning of all ignorance. Alright, so I decided, being the nerd that I am, to find all this chaos with some sort of quantification. And what did that mean? So I was living in Silicon Valley at the time, and those of you who've lived in Silicon Valley, in San Jose, which is kind of an area I worked in tech, this is pretty much a typical checklist you might see. Is a single. As opposed, I mean, that was actually pretty easy to get those two, but that part was not as easy, actually. And so I decided to actually increase the yield and go online. And it's pretty much the same thing. I had to modify it a little bit, basically, and just make sure, you know, that she wouldn't stalk me. And so I decided to move, various reasons that my address was known, into San Francisco, and I have a new checklist here. It's pretty much the same first part. And all these other things, because it's just a lot of kind of confident, all sorts of great things. Like, because there's so many, you know, there's at least relative to San Francisco, San Jose, all these things. so new problem, right? New problem. So I decided to kind of quantify the women or the people that I meet, sort of, do they satisfy these dimensions? And these are kind of the percentages, personally, I kind of roughly put in there. Is there what we get? Percentages of the human beings that I meet. How, I mean, sort of, and if I have a decent conversation, can I kind of rank them in here? Very, I can see this being sort of contentious stuff. That's the point. I want to get you guys riled up. So going here. And I think, you know, in general, this kind of happens in conversations, you know. So, oh yeah, she was, you know, she's kind of goofy, or she wasn't very goofy, or whatever, what have you. And it kind of arose at these, arrived at these percentages, and that puts it at every 78,125,000 people I meet, 63 kind of satisfy my requirements, or roughly kind of about 1 in a million. You know, so she would meet like a million people, and I'll be alright. So, okay, so that's where the real journey began for me. Is I tried to kind of think to myself, well, why the hell am I limiting myself so much? Right? Why am I making it so hard on myself to actually find somebody? And I think I kind of, right now I'm at sort of here, this idea of you need to kind of exist with this other person, and I put that in quotes. What does that even mean, to exist with somebody? I think one of the things in my last relationship that I didn't feel was that I actually existed. I kind of felt like I could just be anybody and then it would be okay. And for some reason that didn't work. I don't know how to get out of that. So that's my answer. That's kind of my answer to a relationship. And talk to me afterwards if you disagree, because I'd like to hear other opinions on that. So, I guess going back a second, how does this manifest itself into the quantified self? All right, so I came up with this model. It's not very new, but basically you got this sort of core self to who you are, and then you've got this outer stuff that can change. The blue self, that outer self, is a pretty nice dude, right? Very agreeable, and you can kind of learn anything really. It just kind of changes. You can learn to surf, so if you're dating a surfer girl, you can learn that, and it's awesome. The inner self, kind of an asshole, does not compromise ever. Has to be locked up sometimes, but you can't contain it forever. And that person will sabotage any decisions that inhibit it. The inner self demands a life where it can exist freely. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up real fast. So I decided to be picky about being picky and come up with fewer dimensions, things that define who I am, come up with these couple things. The one to point out really, so it's positive energy creating the world. My past. I grew up in New York City, had kind of a rough past, if you can imagine, in New York City, kind of in the 80s type of thing. I was looking at this other person to kind of heal me in a lot of ways. And this last thing about discovery, exploration, is kind of all these things make me feel alive, and I felt like that's what it meant to exist with somebody. So I came up with this. These are real data. The identities have been hidden, and we come up with kind of, none of them really satisfying so far, but whatever, you know, whatever. And luckily I was actually able to eliminate a dimension, healing part, because I thought, just do that for yourself, right? So that's just 3 things. I don't think it's unreasonable, but it all goes into what you really, how can somebody be rated a 5 or a 4 or whatever you mentioned. Deep quotes, love these things. Know yourself to gain more wisdom, and there's other one that's a really awesome quote. I can't remember that. And then the future of dating, basically, this is kind of a business kind of they don't really mix. It's crazy I was able to get any dates at all, being somebody who quantifies things a lot. So there's this thing called the love detector in Korea. It actually detects the amount of sincerity, the amount of whatnot in a text message. So it's getting there. Technology's getting there. Don't contact me, and future contact is doesn't tap the date. Okay, that's me.
While we're doing questions, if Rob can come up and set up those. So, questions?
Here, I have a question. Yeah. Okay, so thank you for that very personal talk. I want your reflection on the fact that your approach goes directly against where dating sites are and where research, quantitative research on romance is, in the sense that one of the things people are focusing on are very anti-romantic ideas, like closeness in age with the male older than the female, similar economic background, so money issues, racial and ethnic background, even things on the research side that are really sort of scary and anti-romantic, like facial symmetry matching, like people whose faces are relatively symmetrical or the same degree of symmetry seem to find each other. And that's our popular notion of like, oh, he's too handsome for her, or she's too good looking for him, or something. So you've got a different approach, which I respect a lot, but I just wonder if you've ever thought about the fact that there's another type of a really anti-romantic quantification out there.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways this is a response to that. Perhaps a compliment or supplement, I'm not exactly sure, but actually those things seem to matter to a lot of people. I find that almost those things are stage 1, and these things may be stage 2.
So when you did the diagram of the blue, changeable, label, adaptive, and the green, I was thinking that a different way of thinking that is like what you're like on the first interaction you have, like where you're being polite, and when you have company over, and that's your blue self. But the one that will eventually come out, and this connects to how you're ranking data. The real thing I would think about all these incidence levels, because that's what you're talking about, they're not really orthogonal. So it's not when you came up with that 73 million number, it assumed that each of them was independent. They're pretty clustered. But I have no objection to your rating everybody and exhausting in that way. I think that's kind of cool. I just feel that like to get an accurate measure, you have to define how polite somebody is on the first interaction versus the second versus the third. And what you never sample by sampling the space all the time is you're always going for sampling without replacement. So you just keep throwing them away. And you'll get single bead trials, but you'll never be able to find out what somebody's like, say after 15 years together, which is a kind of interesting question.
Okay. Great point, great point. Okay, that's two things kind of in there. I think it was a little bit misunderstood in that it's not even after probably even the 15th interaction. It's almost like something that takes even someone's own journey to kind of unleash that inner part. It's the stuff that can't change at all, kind of stuff. But there's a good point that, you know, maybe I didn't really get to know these about these factors about these people, and that's true. But I think in general, I don't do it to an extent of like maybe they're all sort of surface kind of metrics like goofy or just what's another one? I think witty is in there. Witty was in there, but all these aren't really like the deep testing. Oh wow, yeah, they're not really like as deep as even other metrics I might even really want to. So that I can't think of. I would admit.
Well, I heard that when you go and interview for a job, that usually the decision is made within just like a few seconds because it's actually the intuitive nonverbal communication. So I'm just wondering, did you ask yourself those questions also? Did you make this decision really quickly, still decided to track, but you already knew that you weren't moving forward with the person?
I think the way I think of it is that is actually a way of capturing complexities of that quick or sort of that intuition. I'm really just trying to shed light on that intuition. So I think so. Yes.
The last question over there. Okay. Just yell it out.
I'm wondering if you ever thought about sort of turning the model a little bit, so instead of applying all the metrics to the other person that you're meeting,
yes,
if you were going to use the model to really gauge your reaction to that person and kind of apply the analysis to what your desires really are and where they come from as a way to really figuring out yourself really first to figure out who the right person is.
I had to rush on that part at the end. If I get what you're saying is, where did these come from? Why do I want these? Is that what you're saying?
Or how you cultivated this taste.
How I cultivated this taste. I had to rush on. I think maybe, I might not be understanding what you're saying, but I think that's actually what I was trying to do by distilling it into these like 3 or 4 things in there. Instead of like 15 different issues, this or that, it's really like, what do I really like, where I want to move it? It's all relating to what it means to me to exist and like be alive. Come to those 3 things of exploring and things like that.
We'll be here for more questions. Thank you again for